system look like? Because it is a little different. Some things have changed. How to get your way around the new folder structure and how things build and those type of concerns. And then lastly, we'll talk about actually building up your application, how you deal with the new HTTP request pipeline, how you think about the new runtime and where you can host it. Like you can host it now in more places than you ever could before. You can host it in IIS, which is our premier web server still, of course. But you can now host it in your own process if you'd like to. You can even host it on Linux or a cross-platform server if that's what you want to do. So we'll talk about actually building applications and dealing with HTTP concerns. So first, though, how do you actually get started with ASP.NET 5? What do you need to do to actually get the bits? The first thing you should do is you should go to ASP.NET/vnext, and you need to install Visual Studio 2015. There is a new project system that comes with the ASP.NET 5, new tooling. You're going to want all these things, and so you're going to need to download the preview of Visual Studio 2015 onto your machine.
You can do this side by side. It's safe?
It's safe, yes. It installs cleanly side by side with Visual Studio 2013, and you can remove it. It doesn't affect anything else on the machine. I do this all the time, and it works just fine. Yeah, okay. So that's what you're going to want to do. The docs are also at that same spot. If we want to learn, like, how do I get started with an ASP.NET 5 project, get an overview of the system, that's where you're going to find all of our preview documentation at ASP.NET/vnext. And more documentation just keeps getting added there. That's where we're adding our docs. The code, of course, is the best documentation. And you'll find the code on GitHub, github.com/ASP.NET, ASP.NET. And I recommend starting at the home repo. That has like get you oriented in terms of where everything is at. It has some initial instructions if you want to do things from the command line, which we'll be talking about later in the day. But that's where you can find all of our repositories, MVC, the runtime, Razor, routing. It's all there. You can look at the code. You can debug through it and see what's actually going on underneath the covers. And if you need help, if you run into any issues or want to ask the community some questions or the product team questions, we're out there in a variety of places. We have a forum. On the ASP.NET side, there's a set of forums, and there's a vNext forum that you can post questions to. We're also on Stack Overflow. There's a tag here that you can use. And then our product team members also regularly hang out on Jabber, which is like a live chat room. You can find us and our architects there hanging out. You can ask us questions and give us suggestions and all those types of things. OK. So let's assume that you've gone and installed Visual Studio. What do you do now? Let's go take a look at it. So I happen to have Visual Studio 2015 already installed on this machine. This is actually a slightly newer build than the actual official preview build. This is bits that are coming out soon that we hope to get into people's hands soon. So a few things may look slightly different if you have the official preview already on your machine. But these are things that will be coming and be in your hands shortly as well.
But the concepts are the same?
Concepts are the same.
Okay.
No major changes. If there are any changes, I'll call them out.
OK.
All right, so what do we do first? You're going to want to do File New Project. All right, and when you do File New Project, you should go to the web node. That's where you build, if you want to build web applications, that's where you're going to go. And you'll see that there's a couple new project templates that show up here. First of all, there's ASP.NET Web Application. Well, that's the project template that you know and love. That's where you'll find the one ASP.NET dialog that lets you pick between MVC, Web API, Web Forms. And there are, of course, ASP.NET 5 project templates there as well. There's also these two new templates, the notion of an ASP.NET 5 class library. And that might be interesting. Why is there an ASP.NET 5 specific class library? Well, one way you can think about it, well, first of all, it plugs really seamlessly into the new ASP.NET 5 project system. That's what that guy's there for. It's already set up with the new project system and the build system. It also, you can think of it more like a package. Like I think of it actually as the ASP.NET 5 NuGet package template because it makes it really easy for you to build NuGet packages from class libraries. It's sort of a first class notion in that project template. And then lastly, there's an ASP.NET 5 console application, which is really interesting. Why do you build ASP.NET 5 console applications? Remember we talked about that ASP.NET 5 can be hosted in more places than ever before. You can host it in IIS. You can host it in your own process. This is a template that you could use to host it in your own process. It's also just a really simple place to do Hello World. Like if you just want to have a console and print out some text and see how the new system works, how the NuGet packages works and the build system. That's like a playground that you could use.
So it's a console app that uses the new project system.
New project system, console app, and it's set up to use. You can do like self-hosting of ASP.NET 5 applications in that template.
All right, cool.
But let's go ahead and build just a standard web app. Let's go there, and let's call this MVA demo. Okay, so here's the standard one ASP.NET dialog, and here's those two new templates that I talked about. The first one here is the starter web template, and this will feel really familiar if you've ever done File New Project, MVC5 project. This guy will feel very familiar in terms of when you run it. Like it's got Bootstrap wired up, it's got ASP.NET Identity wired up, you can log in, it's got jQuery included, it's got all the bells and whistles. EF is in there, and actually I have a version of it already created just to...
Well, and could you go back real quick?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah, I noticed that. Go ahead and click on like MVC at the top.
Yeah, up here.
You see how those check boxes there, you can check, this is part of one ASP.NET. You could click on Web API and include that. But when you click on Starter Web, those are all grayed out.
Yes. That's because, and we'll be talking about this soon, is that in ASP.NET 5, MVC, Web API, Web Pages are now all one thing.
Okay.
You just add
there.
the web framework. We call it MVC6 is the new brand, but they're all actually there. You can do all the things that you want to do in terms of Web API development, Web UI development, all within that one project template.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, yeah. And I apologize for the fonts. I made everything big, and that caused some weird overlaying of some text.
Sure.
But like I said, I already created a starter web template, and you can see here it's got tons of stuff in it. It's got configuration. We're looking at some of the code here. It's got EF. You can see identity, MVC. It's quite a bit. A little overwhelming to get started. So I think what we'll actually do is we'll just do empty. Let's just start with like blank slate and build up from scratch.
And you'll explain to us what's going on with all that. So by the end of this, we'll feel comfortable.
By the end, we'll understand that starter web template much better. Okay, so when you do an empty project, this is empty. Like there's like nothing here. If we run this guy, we should expect to see like 404 essentially from IS. So saying, yeah,
oh, really?
There's nothing.
So you run it, nothing, literally nothing.
This is empty.
I thought not even hello world.
You don't have to delete anything other than this little, helper HTML page that we give you to give you a bunch of links to find out how to get started. That's the only thing in this template, this little project README that you have to delete.
Okay.
Everything else is just the bare bones, what you need to get going. Okay. Now, so first, let's go through. Let's actually get something running. Really fast. Let's do, how do you do hello world in this template? So here's the actual project template, and we're going to talk about what all these folders mean in a second. But before we do that, let's just see if we can get something to actually display in the browser. So to do that, I'm going to go to startup.cs, and this is really where the guts of your application are defined. This is where you set up your HTTP request pipeline. Anything you want to do with an HTTP request coming into ASP.NET 5, you do it here. And I'm going to do the simplest possible thing you could possibly do. when I see a request, I'm just going to return some text. That's what we want to do. Now you see this app builder. That's the guy you're going to use to build up your app. So again, already this is a little different. Like normally in an ASP.NET app, you expect to see like global ASAX. You expect to see a bunch of application events. In ASP.NET 5, you're going to be looking for that same logic in startup.cs.
So this is kind of like global ASAX's application start, but all the other stuff like request, this and that, and all those things are not here.
They're not here. That's right.
I set all that up inside this one function.
This is where you're going to set it up.
Okay.
Yep. So let's start building up my app, and I just want to return some text, so I'm going to use this this method called run. And if we look at the signature, let me see if I can do that the zoom trick. So you see that it takes a request delegate. Now, what is a request delegate? That's a pretty simple concept, actually. Let's look at it. Let me look over this guy. So you see a request delegate is something that takes a, let me snap it so I can. It takes an HTTP context. So that sounds familiar, right?
Yeah,
HTTP context. And then it returns task. Okay, HTTP context and returns task. So pretty easy. Like I'm going to get the request, and I can do asynchronous stuff, and I can send something on the response just like you would with an HTTP context in the system web world. Now this is not the system web world, so this HTTP context looks a little different.
I noticed that it's not system.web.http.
That's right. This is the Microsoft ASP.NET HTTP context, part of ASP.NET 5. It's new. This thing works not just in IIS, in the standard ASP.NET pipeline. It runs anywhere, on Linux, on Mono, on...
But I assume it behaves like the HTTP context that I know about. It's concept compatible.
A lot of similarities. Like there's HTTP context response, request. There's no HTTP context current, because we generally shy away from using statics throughout the system in ASP.NET 5, so things are more testable and easier to manage. But a lot of the things that you would expect to be there are.
Okay.
So let's go ahead and create our request delegate. Now, I'm just going to create the delegate inline. So I'm going to take the HTTP context. Now, I want to do something async. And so I don't know, some people don't know this trick, but you can actually define a lambda that's async just by prefixing it with async. And I'm going to set up a little lambda function here. And then I want to write out some text. So I'm going to await context.response.write async. And Hi MVA. How about that? Okay. And let's close up our semicolon. So what does that do? So we take the HTTP context in. This is a request delegate. Remember, it's asynchronous. And then we're going to write to the response asynchronously, hi MVA. All right. Now I'm just going to save this. One of the cool things about ASP.NET 5, by the way, and the tooling, is there's really no explicit build step. Like I think I already have this running, right? Yeah, here's like there's nothing here, right? I think I could just refresh this, and boom, it's just there.
It's pretty fast.
It's kind of like like those interpreted style programming models like Ruby or Node. You just edit the code, you save it, and you have 5, and it's there. You edit, you save, you have 5. You want to see that again? That's like let me go back.
So when you hit build, it doesn't really do anything. It's like spell check.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. So I'm going to put a whole bunch more exclamation point save, Fi the browser. A little lag there, but you can see all those.
Right, that lag was the build.
Yeah, that's right. It's actually it's like tearing down the process and restarting it again with the build and the restore. And the build is actually happening in memory using I think the official name is the .NET compiler platform, but everyone calls it Roslyn, like
right.
the Roslyn compiler libraries, which is pretty cool. So all the compilation is happening in memory. Okay, so that's hello world. Like we just created our first ASP.NET 5 application. And next, let's go.
One quick question though. I think the hello world, a lot of people might have understood as they'd make like a default ASPX and they type response.write hello world. That would include a whole bunch of extra stuff. This is raw. This is like there's no framework. There's
nothing else here. There's no like forms auth module. There's no like
no modules of any kind.
Yeah,
right?
no modules at all. Like,
is there any web config? There's nothing.
There's in ASP.NET 5 we've actually gone with a new lightweight config system.
Okay.
We'll show that in a minute. But yeah, there's no web.config at all in the
And you went not response.write but response.write async. So people got to really start thinking about async.
Yes, everything in the system is async because threads on a server are a precious resource.
So that means potentially performance is going to be a lot easier to achieve in this new world.
Yep. That's
all right.
the idea. Now let me hop back over the slide. So that was hello world. Now what we want to do next is talk about the project system. So this is a point where we'll take that people can think about a little bit what they've just done. Mm-hmm. All right, let's go to the project system. All right, so let's look at what we actually have here in the solution. So first of all, there's some solution items. There's this global.json file. Let's ignore that for just a second. I'll come back to it and then explain it. So there's also this source file at the top. Like we actually are being a little bit more opinionated about the structure of the folders in your solution. We put your source underneath the sources folder. This is a fairly common pattern that we see in projects on GitHub. And it's fairly common also to have another folder sitting next to it. It's like test, which has all your tests. It's not actually the stuff that's not part of your app, but you're using to actually test your app. Mm-hmm. So this global JSON file is just a little file that tells the runtime that the source code for this solution can be found under the sources folder, but there's also more stuff under test. And so that projects that are in either folder can find each other. So that's what that sources property is in global.json. That's all it's doing. There's no actual tests folder in the empty project because it's empty. But if you were to add one, this would make your test projects be able to easily reference your class libraries and your web application projects under source. Okay, and then this solution only has one project underneath source, MVA demo, and then we have some new interesting nodes here. So the first one is www root. What is this? Well, this is the web root of your application. Like you can think of this as like this is where your web server is sort of looking at, like it's parked at. Like this is where if you have static files like an HTML file, that's where you would expect to serve them out of. If you had script files, that's where you expect them to be. And the reason why this folder exists is because we want to have a nice separation between stuff that's really only server side, like code and binaries, things that are meant to only stay on the server, they're never supposed to be served up, and the stuff that's actually intended to be served by the web server. So the web root is www root.
So in ASP.NET today, if I wanted to have like my fave icon, I would stick that at the MVA demo level in ASP.NET current. In this next version, I would put it in www root.
Yes, because that's something that you'll want to be able to serve in response to an HTTP request.
Okay.
So just to show that, let me add a simple static file here. Let me add like a little HTML page. That one looks fine. Let's put something in here like.
Okay, so if I put that HTML page at the root level, it would be ignored. I couldn't get to it from there. I can't serve it from there.
That's right. Like nothing outside this www root will get served. And also, because the startup is currently saying like respond with hi MVA for everything, let me just comment that out. There. Okay. So save. All right. Now if we go back over here, I should expect to be able to go to HTML page.
And is ASP.NET set up to give you static files by default?
So we said that there's nothing in ASP.NET 5 unless you put it there inside that startup file. It's empty. And that includes actually even support in ASP.NET 5 for serving up static files. So ASP.NET 5 itself, yeah, it wouldn't even serve up a static file. Now the server that you sit on top of may have functionality that it just provides. Like depending on the server you pick, you get different stuff. And IIS is a wonderful server, and it happens to have a wonderful native module for doing static files. It's blazingly fast,
I see.
and it's always there. Like that, the ASP.NET 5 doesn't remove the native components that just come with IIS. So in this case, this should work. Let's make sure. Yeah, so that worked. That was IIS though.
But let me guess, if I were doing this in my own process, hosted my own HTTP server, I'd have to pick that file up and I'd have to basically opt in to ASP.NET static file serving.
Yes, and we'll show you how to do that.
Oh,
We'll show you
okay,
that
cool.
in a minute.
That
But for
makes
now, that's the concept of www root though, is that's where static content is really going to get served from.
All right, that makes sense.
All right. Okay. Now there's a bin folder here, and this is just a little artifact that's used by the runtime to wire ASP.NET 5 into IIS essentially. It's sort of a bootstrapper. It's not really part of your application. It's just something that the runtime puts there to bootstrap ASP.NET 5.
If I delete that, will it come back?
I don't know.
All right, well,
You can try it on your.
let's
try
not
it at
find
home. It should probably honestly be hidden. It's more of a under the covers thing.
I see.
Okay.
That is a real folder, though, to be clear. Even though it has a little globe there, that's a folder.
Oh, yeah. Shall we look
www,
at
it
it?
exists on the disk, just to be clear?
Let me pop it up. So here's,
All right.
here's the actual
Just checking.
www folder, and it has a bin folder, and there's the page.
Okay.
This is just the normal folder structure.
All right, cool.
All right, and then dependencies. This is a new node. This is an interesting node. This is stuff that your project depends on, and this is an empty project, so it doesn't actually have anything in it. But if we go to the, let's go to the starter web template. Oops, I can't cycle quickly. That one. There we go. In starter web, dependencies had all sorts of interesting things in here, like NPM packages that your app needs. NPM is the node package manager. Maybe you're using node packages for client-side development, or Bower packages that your app is using. These are things that your app needs, and so they show up under that dependencies node. So you mostly find like client-side libraries that you're depending on underneath there. And then references is the same references node you know and love, but improved with additional functionality. One of the great things about references now is that it first classes the concept of referencing NuGet packages in your application. Everything that we do in ASP.NET 5, all the dependencies that your app has from a .NET runtime perspective are all expressed in terms of NuGet packages. And there's first-class notions of like adding NuGet packages, removing NuGet packages, creating NuGet packages, loading from NuGet packages. Like package management really has like changed the way people do development today. You don't go to websites and like download binaries and then reference them in your project anymore. Pretty much you find what you need for your projects using a package management system. NuGet is a fantastic system for .NET, and in ASP.NET 5 we basically said that's how you're going to find things. In fact, you reference them directly from the runtime. And so all the packages that your application is referencing show up here. Now you'll notice that there's also these two top-level elements. And what this is showing me is all the target frameworks that my project is being built for.
Target frameworks, plural.
Frameworks, yes. More than one target framework. Like this app is currently set up by default to run on ASP.NET 5 on the .NET framework, like the .NET framework that comes with Windows, the .NET framework we've known and loved for well over a decade. But there's also ASP.NET 5 that can run on .NET Core, the lightweight, componentized version of .NET that's open source, that just comes as a set of NuGet packages that you can literally bin deploy with your application. This app is being built for both. And it's important that you realize that's different, because the API surface areas in .NET Core versus the full .NET framework are slightly different, and you need to account for those differences in your app.
But if I may be a little critical, that's probably not a very well-named thing, because there's only ASP.NET 5, isn't there? Right? There isn't an ASP.NET Core 5. There's ASP.NET 5 on .NET Core.
Because we could change these names to be
But
clear.
just for people to understand, though, that ASP.NET 5 runs on both the desktop framework and the .NET Core framework. And it is the same ASP.NET 5, right?
It is the same ASP.NET 5.
Okay, because I just wanted to make sure that there isn't an ASP.NET Core 5.
The moniker that we use in like your NuGet packages to say here's the binaries for running on .NET Core, we currently use ASP.NET Core 5.0, and so these names reflected the monikers that show up in the NuGet packages.
Oh, okay,
But,
that makes sense.
So it could go either way. It could be more of the more user-friendly version of the text, or it could be closer to the NuGet package string. Currently, it leans closer to the NuGet package string, but arguably, because it's such in the user's face, maybe it should be the more user-friendly.
And you'll explain more about like when I'm writing an ASP.NET 5 app, what can I do that would get me in trouble where I no longer can run on .NET Core versus?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, cool.
We'll talk about it. We'll get that done in a second.
Awesome.
So let's look inside what these things have, and there's all your NuGet packages. Currently, there's just one. When running on .NET Framework, you also have the option of referencing binaries that are in the GAC. So that's what we're seeing here. These are GAC references. But here I have one package, and it's saying Microsoft.ASP.NET Server IIS. This is basically the package you need to be able to run ASP.NET 5 on IIS.
So the little gift, that's a NuGet package, and then the little squares, that is a regular GAC package like I've always done before.
Yeah, just a normal assembly reference. Now, the nice thing here is you can expand this. Like you're now traversing the dependency graph for all the NuGet packages that you depend on. And when you express your NuGet package dependencies in ASP.NET 5, you express the top level package dependencies, and then it just figures out the rest of them. You don't need to worry about all the leaf nodes of the tree. Just reference the top level package that you need, and the system will figure out the rest. So technically, this app does depend on these other sub dependencies of the top level dependency, but you don't need to directly express that. Now, where do you express that? Is of course the next question. Like, where does that come from? How do I know that I'm referencing those packages? Well, that comes from this new artifact, project.json. ASP.NET 5 apps always have a project.json. This is really what makes this an ASP.NET 5 application. So let's go look what's inside here. All right, so first of all, you can see the fact that www.root is my web root is defined in project.json. If I wanted my web root to be, Dan or Dan Roth, I could change that here, and then the folder name could name it accordingly. So that's where the actual web root is defined, is in your project.json file.
And comparing that with global.json, I'm seeing you have choice at every level.
Yeah.
You don't like the name of something, you can easily change it.
Complete control, very explicit. This is the version of the application. This is perhaps even more relevant if this was a class library, because then you're actually determining the version of the component that you're shipping in NuGet. And then exclude here is saying, don't bother trying to look in the www folder for stuff to compile, because that's my web root, so you probably won't find code there normally. Pack exclude is really about publishing. It's just making sure that when you take this project and bundle it up with all the packages it needs into a single thing that you can deploy to a server, don't bother deploying these things because they're not relevant in a deployment scenario. All right, but now we've gotten to the things that are interesting. So what are my dependencies? Well, they're defined under dependencies. This is where all the dependencies for my application are defined. And then for the target frameworks that I'm compiling against, they're listed under frameworks. So there's that ASP.NET 5.0, ASP.NET Core 5.0, hence where the names came from. So how do I add a dependency? Let's say I want to add something new. Well, you can still do like right-click, manage NuGet packages from the UI. And this is the new NuGet client UI for dealing with packages. Let me see if I can get something to show up here instead of it just being empty. You can install NuGet packages using the UI, and that works just fine. The nice thing about this new UI is it's no longer modal. Like you can just sort of leave it here as a tab and do work on your project, and then come back and install more packages and do more work on your project, and you can have that nice parallelism going on. So it's pretty decent. But all this guy will actually do under the covers is a very simple edit to project.json. Let me show you what it will do. If you actually were to install a package, it would just add it here under dependencies. Like, let me add a package. There's a package that, a simple little package called Microsoft.ASP.NET Diagnostics. And this guy just has like an error page, a welcome page, error handler logic. It basically has the yellow screen of death in it. If you want to have a yellow screen of death for your ASP.NET 5 application, you've got to add it. It doesn't come for free. So you got to add the package, and this is the yellow screen of death package.
I'm disappointed you didn't call it YSOD.
Oh, sorry, the YSOD.
You should name the package that.
Maybe we should name it, yeah.
So you're bringing that down now?
Yeah, and notice I got IntelliSense over the package ID, and I also get IntelliSense over the version of the package that I want to reference. When you set up your dependencies, it's a package ID and a version. Pretty straight.
Now that has a different build number. Is that good or bad?
So this is like I said, this is a newer bit. So this is a specific build of Beta 2. We ship Beta 1 with preview.
Right.
And the packages, they all build on their own rhythm. So dev checks in. We check it into our GitHub repositories. The CI server kicks off a new build, and you get a new build of that particular package. So the build numbers aren't necessarily all aligned on the same number across everything in ASP.NET 5. And you can just expect that to continue because it's a loosely coupled set of packages that you pull in what you need.
But this won't cause, like this one being newer, is not going to cause a bunch of other new stuff to kind of roll in? Big dependency?
That's really more of a question of like which NuGet package feeds I've got configured and what the package says its dependencies are.
Okay.
So I have control over which packages it will find by just changing which package sources that I let it look at. If I go let it look at like the ASP.NET 5 dev feed, it's going to pick up whatever the latest build is that
I
let's
see.
check in on that guy. And maybe that's what you want. Like maybe you're doing active development, you want to use the latest greatest packages. If you want to use like more stable released packages, then you probably just would set up your feed to use NuGet.org. In which case you would only find, for example, beta 1 packages. This particular the version that you just saw, you notice it had like a little folder icon next to it.
Right.
That meant that this is actually the locally installed version of that package that came with Yes.
Ah, that's what the folder means.
Yes. Now, when it had the little if it has a little NuGet icon underneath it, then that means it's actually coming from one of your feeds.
Oh, okay. So I could potentially be editing my project.json on an airplane with my local NuGet cache, and it's fine as long as I have the little folder icon.
That's right.
All right.
Now, if I save this, now watch carefully. Watch in the Solution Explorer. As soon as I hit save, it kicked off what's called a package restore. You'll notice, boom, it just shows up.
That was fast.
So you edit, you save, and then your project just updates. Okay, and there's some similar thing if you want to remove it. And that's all that the right-click NuGet Package Manager does. It just adds the package ID to your project.json and then saves it and kicks off a package restore. That's all it's really.
So somebody's watching project.json.
So there are file watchers involved here. Yes, but good ones, very benevolent. They're not the
Who watches the file watcher? Okay.
That's right. So again, if I save, then it just disappears again.
Cool.
That's adding and removing packages. Okay. Now, what about though if you actually want to reference a project? Like how do you do that? So let me let's add another project here. So let's add.
So this would be where the ASP.NET class library comes in then.
There you go.
See?
That's
There you
right.
go.
So we want one of these guys because one of these guys is set up already with project.json. It's set up with that build system, that notion of having packages as first-class notions and building. It can itself be easily built into a package.
And this is interesting because in the other project.json, you had frameworks, ASP.NET 5 and ASP.NET Core 5. But here it looks like you can have dependencies different based on your target framework.
That's right. And you may need that. Like, for example, if you're in on the .NET framework, and you're referencing, what's effectively MS Core Lib, like the and system.dll. Like there's tons of stuff that's just in those binaries. They're fairly all-inclusive in terms of the way they've been architected. So you don't need to like go out of your way and say, I would like to reference, system.collections.
Yeah.
But if you're on .NET Core, all those things have been broken apart into separate NuGet packages. Like you have the base class libraries basically shipping on NuGet.org as a set of factored NuGet packages. And you do need to say, yeah, I would like to use collections because if you don't say it, then you don't get it. That type of.
So here you're actually having to say, I want system.runtime.
I would like system runtime. You don't need to say that when you're running on the .NET framework, but when you're running on ASP.NET Core 5.0, you do need to say
That makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah. So but that's where you would define framework-specific dependencies. It's worth also noting that if you want to reference something else that's in the GAC that's not a NuGet package when you're running on the full desktop framework, there is a way to do that. If I can, where is it? It's up here. Yeah. Framework assemblies. And then you would.
Oh, and there's your, I see, and there's your local reference to the
GAC.
GAC.
That's right. That's where we would put those guys. And that's only in the ASP.NET 5.0 notion because that's where the GAC lives.
It's nice that you get like really good tooling for that within, like, you don't have to do this all by yourself with no IntelliSense.
Yeah, the IntelliSense makes it very, very fast, actually. I don't know how I ever lived working with NuGet packages without this IntelliSense. It's very nice. Okay, so I've got a little class library. Let's just make this a simple static class 1. Public static string, something like that, and we'll return a string like hello from class 1. Okay, now let's reference this guy. How do we do that? You can right-click and add reference, and click this button. Now, just like with managing NuGet packages, this is going to do something very, very simple. Actually, before I do, let me open up the project.json file. So here's my project.json file. There's the existing dependencies.
Right.
If I right-click, add reference, yes, I would like to reference this class library. All it did was add that. That's it. There's actually nothing that gets touched in your kproj, your project file. This is where the project reference gets expressed.
And then the watcher saw that.
Yeah, and the watcher saw that. If I wanted to do this manually, you also do get IntelliSense over that as well. You can see class library 1 shows up as being a project in the solution that you can just reference.
And that package restore that happens when it gets saved, that's because the watcher is making that happen. If I wasn't using Visual Studio, I'd probably have to do that myself.
Yeah, you'd have to handle that.
Okay.
Okay, great. So now I've referenced. Let's see if that actually can do something with that. Let me go back here.
So then IntelliSense is smart enough to know about all that then.
Presumably. Let's see. Let's create a message equals class library 1. There it is. Class library 1 and get message And then let's change our hi thing here to message, save, and then where's my browser? And then not HTML page, but let's just go back to, yeah, to the root, should be fine. There. So
And there's still nothing in your bin folder. It's still